everyone, and welcome to Tal Talks. We have our second edition for Nightly November, and I have a very special guest today. This is Sir Ronan, and you're going to have to say...
Duberic.
Duberic. Okay, you know what? Spell that so that people know how hard that was for me.
D-U-H... No, sorry, D-U-B-H-B-E-R-A-C-H.
Okay.
Even I get it wrong sometimes.
Is that's Irish?
It's Celtic. It's Irish. Basically, it means dark pointed.
Oh, it's really cool, but I have never been able to pronounce anything in... When I see Irish, I'm just like, okay, there's too many consonants, and now I don't know what to say.
Yeah, let's throw like 4 consonants together, and then maybe a vowel. We'll see.
And he's from the Knights of Gore, which I think you can kind of imagine with that name what kind of stuff they do. But can you actually describe what it is that you do at Renaissance fairs?
So if you hear me yelling at a fair, you probably hear me yell, live armored combat. What we do is akin to what I say, medieval MMA. We do full contact, unscripted fighting with steel weapons, real armor, and we can do punches and takedowns and whatever works to win. Aside from, certain things we don't want to encourage, but for the most part, anything you want to hit with anything else you want to hit it with is okay.
So if you're gonna punch someone, you have like armor on your, like a gauntlet or something.
I have that. That would be coming straight like that.
It makes me think of Thanos right there.
Yeah, my nickname in the group is the Hammer, and it's because my fists hit like hammers. I like to punch. It's fun.
Well, yeah, you're not a small person.
I'm not a small person. No. I might look in the camera, but I'm really not.
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty tall, too. Like, you're just
about 6
person.
feet. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you see that in all the armor, it's pretty intimidating. It definitely probably, scares some of the other fighters when they see you coming.
I think it scares them more when I start laughing when they hit me. They hate it when I do that.
Luckily, you're a nice person.
I really am. It's funny. Jeff, who is the leader of the group, he often says that I'm the nicest guy until I put my helmet on, and then I get scary. And so I'm only scary a little bit of the time.
So speaking of helmets, what kind of armor do you use? Like, what do you normally wear when you're in a fight, or maybe even like right now, sort of out of a fight? You're wearing. It looks like you wear underneath the armor mostly.
Most of us wear what's called a gambeson underneath, which is basically padded layer of linen. It helps a little bit with absorbing the shots. Unfortunately, in the summer, when you get hot and you get sweaty, it kind of diminishes the effectiveness of it. And right now I'm in a state that I would say is beginning of armoring. So normally I have a squire that assists me, and I would start off with the gambeson. And then the gambeson has these attachment points that we attach the various pieces of armor to. And so they basically become metal clothing. I wear a chest piece and back piece that is titanium, and it's plates of titanium underneath fabric. So that absorbs the shots to a degree, but it doesn't absorb quite as well as, like, say, solid armor. So you do have some impact sensation, if you will. But we try and make sure that the armor that everyone wears is going to protect them to a degree that they're not going to end up in a hospital, though that does happen. And then for a helmet, I have this beast of a helm. And this is one that I actually had made specifically for me. The design, you can see, is all Celtic knotwork.
Crazy.
But you can also see the dents in the helmet because we hit pretty hard.
And when you get a dent in your helmet, are you like, oh man, it's such a, because you have all that design work, or are you like, yeah, this is nice battle scars?
So it's funny. The first dent in the helmet, you're like, oh, my beautiful helmet. I'm really bummed. And then you're like, it's a helmet.
Yeah.
And you're like, I've got a dent in it. That's kind of cool. And so as you get more dents until you get to too many dents where it starts to get closer to your skull, and then it's time for a new helmet. This helmet's actually lasted me longer than any other helmet. It's lasted me for 2 seasons. And but I had it overbuilt. It weighs probably over 10 pounds, probably closer to 12.
Holy moly.
Which, if you think about it, if you put a 10 or 12 pound weight on your head and just feel what that feels like on your neck, it's almost like you're getting hit all the time. Ugh. But it's necessary. So we do what we have to do to keep from hospital visits.
So how much does all of the armor weigh together when you have the whole thing on?
It varies. So before I switched over to titanium for my chest and back, my full kit was probably close to 120 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
It took 2 people to lift the coat of plates onto me when it was tempered steel. It weighed 65, 70 pounds on its own. Yeah, it's substantial.
I weigh less than all of your armor combined. if you
ever need a ride on my back, I can do it because I'm used to it all day long. But titanium brought the weight down much lower for me, so I'm probably only in about the 60-pound range now, 70. That's good. Not too bad. It's kind of manageable.
Yeah.
But yeah, titanium is great. It's unfortunately a very light metal, so it doesn't absorb the hits, the inertia, as well as steel plates do, but it lasts forever. So
yeah, that's good. So you said your helmet only lasts 2 seasons. Do you have to just go get a whole new one, or can you get it?
Yeah.
You can't go get it repaired? Once
the integrity is decreased, you really can't fix that. I suppose it's possible, but it's you don't want to risk it, and safety is huge with what we do.
Yeah.
Might not seem it because we're hitting each other like idiots with really dangerous weapons, but it means a lot to make sure that, the person you're hitting, you don't have to worry about them being permanently damaged. It's kind of important because I actually like the people I'm hitting.
I don't think people realize the cost that goes into a lot of these performances.
Oh, yeah.
Because armor itself is so expensive, especially if you want it to be safe. And then, like you're saying, it doesn't last forever.
It's so true. You're so correct on that. A basic set, because I help our new fighters get armored up. A basic set will run about $1,800 minimum. And that's absolute minimum beginner stuff. Most of my helmets are close to $1,000 on their own.
Oh my gosh.
It's granted, mine are a little fancier, a little nicer. There's what we call munitions grade, which is usually for new fighters and people as they're kind of ramping up. And that's ugly, but effective. And then you get up to my stuff, which is fancy and effective. But that basically doubles your price. So yeah, it's not a inexpensive route. If you want to go full plate armor, you're looking at probably minimum of $3,500. That's for at least for me, that's not an easy pay.
No. Now, when you retire a helmet, do you have like a collection? You put it on your wall, or you have a graveyard of helmets?
I really do. It's the weirdest thing. I have these helmets that are just, usually it's the left side is kind of caved in because most people are right-handed.
Yeah.
So they hit your left side. And so that just gets hit over and over and over again. Sometimes we'll bang those out and we'll let the new people train in them.
Okay.
Until they get bumped in. We have to watch them very closely because you obviously don't want someone to, I don't know, have brain damage. Yeah, although we've been accused of having it to even start doing this. But I really could have this like graveyard of helmets that just, they've done their part and now they're done.
Oh, that's amazing. I can just picture it. So what kind of weapons do you use? And where do you get all these things?
So, the Eastern Bloc countries, former Eastern Bloc, so Russia, Ukraine, etc., they've been into this full live combat for longer than we have. And most of our stuff is produced over there. I get some weapons out of the Czech Republic, but I'll give you an example. So I'll give you 2 examples. So I just picked up this week a brand new mace That's all steel.
That looks heavy.
And that's one of my favorite weapons. That's new. This is what it looks like after a couple seasons. It's the reason I got the same one is it's solid. So even though it's beat up, it's still functional. But if I come at you with these, it's pretty serious. It's kind of cool. I enjoy close combat. So I love my maces, also axes. So this is actually Sir Thomas's axe. I'm doing a little work on it for him. We always make sure safety is huge for us. So we put a pin right through here from one side to the other, just as a safety measure to make sure it doesn't come off. They're on there with pressure, and so they're put on in this direction. But as you fight and this gets compressed, it can come off. We don't want to go flying into the crowd. It is not a souvenir someone wants to take home because it would be embedded in them. We don't want that.
No.
But that's another. It's kind of cool. He got a nice one. But you can see our weapons are blunt.
Yeah.
So that we're not cutting into anybody, but the impact is still very real.
Oh yeah.
Substantial. And then of course we have swords, and I didn't bring a sword because swords are a little hard to fit on the screen. But our swords vary anything from, we typically use arming swords, which are a little shorter, a little beefier one-handed sword with a small shield or buckler to kind of work those two things. So you can kind of do some nice attacks. And those shields also become an attack point, so you can punch with them. In our practices in the winter, I will typically go some days where I'll do 2 buckler shields, which makes the new people a little bit insane because they can't figure out how to get around the 2 shields. But I enjoy it. It's kind of fun.
So a lot of people are going to think that you're crazy for doing all this stuff. But what actually got you into it? When did you start? Were you into some sort of movie or something and you were just like, hey, I want to try that? Or was there a person that inspired you to do this? Did you have a specific teacher?
It's funny you say movie too. The first movie I can remember loving, and I still love to this day, is the 1939 Adventures of Robin Hood starring Errol Flynn. He's not much of a fighter, as it were, more of an archer, obviously, but I love that whole genre. And I started loving that early on. And I bought my first sword when I was 11. So my mom and my grandpa who raised me were understanding of my weird interest. And then my friends I played with growing up, we started playing battles with wooden swords and wooden shields that we made and kind of had fun with that. And I'd say the person that inspired me to kind of get into martial arts was actually my physics and chemistry teacher when I was a freshman in high school. My first day of class, picture this, you walk in there, your first day in high school, and you walk in and your teacher is in a karate uniform.
Oh my gosh.
And the whole room is spread out where all the chairs and tables are pushed back, and he proceeds to demonstrate physics on boards, where he explains to us that force equals mass times acceleration. So he breaks a board and says, he has a higher mass and the acceleration is okay, but the board breaks. Then he had another instructor there that was very small, very fast, breaks the same boards. And he explains that his acceleration was higher, even though his mass was lower. And I thought that was both fascinating and fun. And literally the next day I signed up. So I've been training in martial arts since I was 13. I won't say how many years that would be, but it's a lot. And so I was collecting swords on one hand, and I was doing martial arts on the other. And then one point, someone said to me, do you know you can fight with those? I'm like, what? I was so happy. And so I started off in the SCA. That's how I first started fighting medievally. And that was in 1998. And the rest, as they say, is history. And I was in the SCA for quite a number of years. And I still am, but I'm not as active as I used to be. But that's what kind of got me in. And that's when I started using swords like this. It's actually one of my old swords. It's actually in a curve because it was a katana, so to speak. And that's one of the first things I started fighting with.
Looks like a boffer.
Yeah.
Actually, since you started talking about the SCA, a lot of people don't know what that is. Can you tell us a little bit about the the SCA stands for the Society of Creative Anachronisms. And can you tell us what you do in it and a little bit more about what kind of things happen?
Yeah. So the SCA is a really neat group in the sense that they touch on all the bases of medieval recreation. And anachronism, for those who aren't familiar with it, and they always get it confused with anarchy and think, oh, it says anarchy. No. Anachronism is something that's out of place in time. So they don't go full on historical recreation exclusively. Some people do, but most people aren't. So they kind of pick and choose the parts of history that they're really interested in. The nice thing is you can fight, you can learn things like, medieval cooking or leatherworking or making of mead. I always encourage making of mead, always. And sharing of mead, that's also really important. I bring a cup everywhere I go, just waiting for the mead. But the neat thing is you can learn everything from illumination, which is illustration, and the history and the research and any part of history that fascinates you. They have a group that's very into that. For myself, I went the fighting route because I was always kind of that mentality, if you will. I was very, very fortunate that the first person I met and talked to was my friend Mike, who's a Thanric. And a Thanric in the SCA was at the time a young fighter, but experienced with a few years before me. And he's gone on to be king multiple times of Caid. Caid is the kingdom that handles Nevada, Arizona, I think part of New Mexico. So that southwest area, including Las Vegas, where I used to live. And he was just this amazing and enthusiastic individual that you couldn't help but get excited about. And my very first day at a practice, they put me in armor. This new guy just walking in there, they threw me in armor and beat me.
No.
They didn't hold back. They beat me. And their whole motto was, if you come back a second day, you're in. I came back the second day. But it was a lot of fun. I still consider myself Caidan, even though I'm Kingdom of the East. Whenever there's a war like Penzik and I want to fight with Caid, I have to ask permission of the King of the East to fight with Caid. But so far, they've always allowed me. I just my blood. I say my blood is blue and white, which is their colors. But almost all the guys I started with, all the guys in my unit back then, they've all gone on to be kings.
Wow.
All, I think, or at least knighted. And when I left, I was a high lord, which is a mid-range, not nobility, not necessarily high up there, but it was. I was on my way to the knight route. Got a little sidetracked when I moved east, and I found live steel, and so I got a little bit sidetracked with that. So, yeah, but it was fun.
So and, this is I actually got to talk to a couple other people that have been involved with the SCA, and so now we've spoken with a courtly bard and a courtly magician or a trickster, and then now we have a knight. Yeah, that's a great thing. It's the wonderful part about it. It's so inclusive to anything that you want to do, or however you want to identify, or whatever your niche in life is. You can find a medieval equivalent or a segue that makes sense to people, and it's great. I mean, you go to an SCA event. Everyone at that event, unlike a Renaissance fair, is SCA, and they're all dressed in garb. They're all having a great time. They all have their little thing that they do. And they all respect each other, even if you're not a peer, a knight, or a pelican, or the other one I'm forgetting, which I'm going to get yelled at by somebody for. There's 3 peerages, and they're in service, or they're in creating things, or they're in fighting. Those are the 3 peerages, and it's fun because everyone is just there doing their thing. So there'll be people dancing, there'll be people playing drums, there'll be people handing out mead they made. Lots of mead. Did I mention mead? Mead's good. I like mead. You did. You mentioned mead.
Yeah.
We do have mead at our fair. Next time you're by our fair, we definitely have some mead that you can try. And hard cider.
I'll bring a cup.
So I also wanted to know how often you train, how much time you spend working on, perfecting your skills. What would you say are the do's and don'ts for combat for knights?
So it's super important to learn basics. I usually train with my squires, I'd say right now we're only probably doing it once a month because right now we're in the kind of the far end of the down season. But when we were still getting ready for events, we were training every week to 2 weeks. I make sure that they know how to be safe. That's the first thing you have to learn. So that means when you're fighting, you have to have a proper stance and proper preparation mentally and physically. And you have to be ready to both give and take a hit. And that's before you ever put a piece of armor on, because you have to be in that right mindset. Otherwise, when you finally do get hit, you're not going to be ready and you're not going to know how to handle it. And when you go to hit somebody, you're going to be worried that you're hurting them, but you have to take faith that they have prepared as well. But it's unfortunate that sometimes people go into it and go a little quicker than they should, and they start fighting each other, and then somebody gets hurt, and that sours that whole feeling, both for them and for the person that got hurt. So before we ever let someone hit someone with a live weapon, there's a lot of steps they have to go through, and they have to be approved by myself and Lord Jeffrey or another knight and Lord Jeffrey before they can ever step in front of a crowd, because we want to make sure that we're representing what we do in a positive way, in a way that won't have people walk away thinking, my God, what were those people thinking? That was terrible. I hated seeing that. We want them to go away and say, that was really cool. I want to see that again, because safety is always our primary concern. And when people start to buy armor, I always recommend they buy a good helmet first, because you protect your head. That's the most important thing. Most of our injuries take place, so we're not as well armored. So you always want to make sure that you have good armor in the important places. And that's the toughest thing to kind of get people. People start getting that feeling of invincibility because they have armor on.
Yeah.
But you can still be hurt because, again, on ancient battlefields, people got hurt in full armor.
Oh, yeah. All the
happens.
time. I mean, you can still break a bone just because you have, metal over it. Have you ever seen any injuries during a fight, or have you ever been injured?
This is a funny question. And I almost think someone said something, because my nickname in the SCA was Re-breakable Ron.
No.
Not unbreakable, God knows. Unfortunately, re-breakable.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the other rumor was that I just really like meeting nurses and I didn't know how else to do it. So I ended up in ambulances 4 times.
Oh, no.
And they were usually neck or back injuries, because you're wearing a lot of armor and that adds a lot of weight. And so if you fall in the wrong way, you can damage things.
Yeah.
I've been knocked unconscious.
Oh, jeez.
I've been delirious from dehydration. I've broken more fingers and ribs than I care to admit to. Yeah, there's been a lot of injuries. Our stuff is blunted, but I've seen it actually puncture people. That's why we don't generally do thrusting, because it's just too much of a risk.
Yeah.
Even with the right protection, it's not worth it. It doesn't play well to the crowd, and it's just too much of a risk. But there's been a lot of injuries, a lot.
I think dehydration is generally the biggest one. It's the biggest one at our fair for everyone, for patrons, for performers. People just don't realize how hot it is, and they're having so much fun that they forget that they need to keep hydrating the whole time.
Yeah, it's tough with us because you add the heat plus the armor, and the armor doesn't breathe. Yeah. And the adrenaline is kicking in, though, because you are fighting and you are getting hit. And so that adrenaline rush, those endorphins, just make you feel like you're okay. and then you stop fighting, and all of a sudden you just hit the ground.
Yep.
Because you're dehydrated.
It all hits you. Yeah.
It does. It does.
Well, I used to work at an ambulance, and I would have loved to have an armored person show up. We never had anything that fun.
It's usually a good story. You end up in an emergency room wearing armor, and everyone wants to poke their head in and look and like.
Yeah, getting it off of you would have been not as fun. Yeah, I don't think our shears would have helped too much getting through the leather straps and trying to get all the pieces off.
It would be a challenge.
Bring your squire with you.
Exactly.
So what is actually your favorite part about Renaissance fairs? What makes you do what you do?
Well, I think it's a couple parts. I'd say the two main ones for me are the younger patrons that just get super excited. It's real. The fiction is real for them, and they root for you and they cheer for you and they are invested in your success or your failure. And I've won my share of fights, but every once in a while I'll have a young patron that has followed me throughout the day and all my fights, and I'll be winning, and then the end, I might lose the final melee. And I've had them come up to me and say, it's okay, Sir Ronan, you'll get him next time. I believe in you. It's just the most, endearing moment. And, for these kids, it's just, they're living in that moment, that reality that we're creating. And it's just so much fun to see that on their faces, where they've gained something and they've enjoyed something that, they never saw before. And then the other part that I really enjoy is I really enjoy the combat. I really enjoy fighting. I enjoy testing, the people I've taught, and in different ways, and which sometimes makes them crazy. Because I'll come out with a weapon combination and like, what am I going to do about that? Because I've never seen that before. Or I'll just lower my arms and just, take some shots, and then when they're worn out, then I'll go after them. And it's kind of fun to kind of have that back and forth where it's like a ribbing, if you will, when between friends, where you're gonna mess with them a little bit and they're gonna mess with you a little bit, and it's fun. Granted, there is an intensity to it. There is a pain and a noticeable danger, but in the end, most of the time, I say, no one gets seriously hurt, and you can brag at the fire at the end of the night and kind of have a fun time with that. But it's that martial challenge is great, and also just the kids are wonderful.
So how do you know someone's won or lost? When someone loses, do they say yield or?
So we have a couple of different ways, or actually three ways, I'd say. So we have a herald. His name is his real name is Gary, and but he does an amazing job, and he will sometimes say, ask the crowd, who do you think won? Which for me, sometimes I don't care for, because we have some smaller fighters, female fighters, and if I'm fighting them and I feel like I've clearly won, the crowd loves the underdog. They absolutely do, and they will give it to them every single time. And I'm like, I know I lost, because they're going to go for her. But, I don't mind it. It's fun. You win some, you lose some. But the most common way for us is who is still standing. Because we can do takedowns and punches and everything else. And after a while, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And we say this when we fight. People don't realize, but the longer you are in your helmet, the more you're suffocating, literally.
Yeah.
Because you don't get all the air out of the helmet, even though there's perforations, you're starting to rebreathe more and more CO2. And after a while, you are not getting the oxygen you need, and it absolutely just wipes you out.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's definitely tough. And then once in a while, we'll do what we call points, or point sparring. And we typically do that in light kit, but that's where you get a solid blow. The first one to strike a solid blow gets that point. And we can even do it as continuous. So one person will be counting the blows for one fighter, and the other will be counting the blows for the other fighter. And we'll do kind of a point sparring system. But I don't like the points because to me, I'm not as fast as I am strong, so I can hit harder but less often. So I like the submission one because that's more fun for me.
You like the one where you win the most.
Yeah, I do.
Do you have?
Surprise.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said surprise. I like the one that I win the most.
I didn't hear that. That's hilarious. Do you have any funny stories, weird things that happened when you were at a performance or at a fair?
Yeah. So the funniest one to me is when I was a new fighter and I got my first helm. I didn't properly pad it,
Oh no.
and I was out of practice, and I got hit on the back of the head because, especially in the SCA, they'll do this thing called a wrap, and it comes in and actually hits you on the back of the head or the back or the rear. It comes around in a way you would not expect, and it hit me on the back of the head, and it knocked me out, and I hit the ground like a sack of potatoes.
Oh geez.
And my very good friend at the time came over to me and said, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, whatever." And he's like, "Are you Batman?" And so I then responded with expletives I don't want to share on a public broadcast, but and that became a kind of a funny joke. Now you flash forward to about 2 years later, maybe 3 years later, we're at this big war called Estrella, which is in Arizona. And I basically went down with dehydration. That was the time I went just out. And this knight comes over, Sir Reese, who was a very good friend of the group, and he wasn't in our area, so he wasn't there for that practice. But he was very concerned. He wanted to make sure I was okay. And he came over and he looked at me and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Do you know your name?" And I just looked at him and I said, "I'm Batman." Which everyone around me knew the reason it was funny, but he didn't. And I saw him go pale. And he said, "We need a medic. We need a medic now." And they all calmed him down and said, "No, it's okay. That's actually okay." And he was like, "How's that okay? How's that okay?" But
the man thinks he's Batman. Oh no, he is Batman.
Batman, for God's sake, that's not right.
You're like, oh no, he is Batman. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It is Batman.
That's great. I often see that hat on your head, the fur.
Yes.
Where did that come from? What is that? Does that symbolize something? Does it have to do with your character or?
So I'd say most SCA events, especially on the West Coast, happen in the fall and winter months because summer is 105.
Oh God.
And so you don't want to fight in 105. And it would get very cold at night. So I have a collection of these lovely hats. And a lady actually out of Canada, her name is Michelle Franklin. And I really should know the name of her business, but I just know her as Michelle. She was always at our events out there, even though she came from, I want to say, Nova Scotia or somewhere abouts there. Why she ended up in the southwest of the United States for events, I can't explain to you. But she also is a Penzic. Wonderful lady. She used to have this dog named Zeus, which I used to hang out with her and Zeus and everything. But she made this hat for me, and she makes all of her hats out of recycled fur. So it's actual fur, but it's been recycled. So it's very, very warm, which is why I might have a little bit of a shine to me. But they're really comfortable, and she makes them custom, and she makes them according to your design. And it's actually a funny story with this hat because she had made a custom hat for me, and I went to pick it up from her, and I didn't like it. And this one was sitting next to it, and I said, "I thought that one was mine." And she said, "No, but it could be," and so it was. But it's a common design for a lot of cultures. Fur plus leather equals warm, so it was a very nice warm option for most people.
That story's really funny because it actually happened to me with a bass.
Oh yeah.
I went to my bass guy and I was looking for another bass for different things. And he showed me a couple of them that were supposed to be like really nice, and I played on them and I was like, I'm not really feeling it. And there was a bass like tucked in the corner, and it was all black and it was covered in spider webs. And I was just like, might I try that one? And he's like, that one? He's like, somebody sent me. He said, a man who was almost 100, had brought it in for repairs, and then never came back. And he had it for like 10 years, and he was hoping to get a hold of somebody, but he couldn't find anyone related to the guy. And so he's like, I unfortunately think the man passed away and never came back for the base.
Wow.
And he couldn't get a hold of anybody who knew him or anything. And so he's just like, you know what? This is meant to be yours. Just here. So I ended up.
You have a dead man's base.
I do, and it's named Morticia.
That's
I named it
very
Morticia,
appropriate.
and it's from the 1930s, and it's really an awesome. It sounds beautiful. So I play it in his memory, whoever he was. I don't actually know anything about him, but I think he'd want his bass to keep, playing music, and that's what all bassists want.
That's
So you've been talking a lot about bringing in new people and showing them the ropes, but what kind of advice do you have for someone who maybe wants to get into armored combat and has never tried any of this stuff before?
The first thing I would suggest is for them to actually come see what we do. If it's during fair season, it's great for them to spend a day with us and just kind of see, because everything on the field is great, but there's a lot of things that happen off the field that have to happen. We have to prepare armor. We have to check armor. We have to fix armor. We have to eat. We have to set up tents. We have to, mill around, within, the people that are visiting. We have to do a lot of things that aren't on stage, if you will, or even on stage but not fighting. And it's sometimes a misconception that people have that it's just, I show up, I fight, I leave. It's not that at all. And so we'd like for them to spend a day with us. And that's something that's, when I became general manager of Knights of Gore, I really worked on recruiting quite a bit, because we break. And we can only do this for so many years, and somebody has to do it when we're done doing it. And so recruiting to me was one of the most important jobs that we could possibly do. And so we've recruited quite a few. And so Lord Jeffrey used to do the recruiting in the group, and he was a terrible recruiter. Bad. No one ever signed up after he talked to them. And I found out why. He would start off telling them how much the armor cost.
Oh, yeah.
And then they're like, I can't afford that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's little bits at a time. You build yourself up.
It is.
It's not something that you would just start out throwing all the money into.
Correct. Yeah, it's something that you get a piece at a time. I had one fighter that was wearing almost all of my old stuff for a good year of his fighting. Now he has his own, but it's, I loan things out that I'm not using. My helmet cemetery. I go into that, and it's one of those things. You just really have to spend time in a group, whether it's us or the SCA. The SCA is good in the sense they have a thing called Iron Key, which they'll loan you armor if you want to fight, or loan you guard if you want to just join into an event. But we make it easy, and like I said, I've got, after 22 years of this, I've got a lot of extra stuff. So a lot of people, when they come in, they'll be walking around in my stuff.
Your little mini yous walking around.
What's that?
Your little mini yous walking around.
Exactly. I'll see videos, and I have to think, when I see a fight, was that me or just my stuff? And it takes a moment sometimes. But I've had people wear my armor that were half my size, because it's adjustable, my chest piece, because it wraps around, and so it just wrapped a whole lot further on them. I have my squire, Raina. She actually wears my old Lambelar from my SCA days, with a hardened plastic piece underneath, and we just took out a bunch of the Lambelar plates to make it fit her. So it's like little mini me's running all over the place, which is kind of funny.
I mean, even some of it, if it's not safe anymore, people could still wear it for like costumes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's saying you can be walking around the fair, you can be squiring, you can look the part without necessarily having to worry about it being effective.
Yeah, that's
so true.
All right, it has come time. Can you get to the chat? Because now is the time for my lovely Marf tongue twister challenge, which I do to everyone who comes on the show.
Wow. I should have brought my glasses. All right. Shall I try this?
Try to do it as fast as you can.
Okay. Merlin made remember memories of mastering, misleading, melancholy, maddening mirages of marriages.
Yay!
Wow.
I really enjoy having, I had one more night before you, having you do it and the other night, because it's not like your thing to talk quickly, where I had people on here where that's just their thing. Like I had sideshow people where, or magicians, and their thing is, to talk really quickly. So they just looked at it and did it in like a second. And I was just like, okay, maybe I didn't make a hard enough one. But I think for a regular person or a knight who doesn't always
I don't train to do that. I really don't.
That is not your expertise. Your expertise is fighting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing my goofy tongue twister. Do you have any shows or anything going on? Maybe talk about your group, websites, things that people can look at to find you.
Absolutely. So our website is knightsofgore.com. On Facebook, we're Brotherhood Knights of Gore. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on basically most of the social medias. But Facebook and our homepage are basically the most common. And the next event I think that we have coming up, at least big event, will be the Spring Robin Hood Festival. And that's in Harwinton, Connecticut.
I think that's where I met you. I think I met you at the Robin Hood.
May, June.
I think that's when I met you, who was at a Robin Hood festival.
Yes. Yeah. First time.
Yay.
Yep.
Do you know the
back
dates?
In the day, that's my first participant.
When are the dates of that again? The Robin Hood Festival this year.
I want to say May 22 to June 20.
And that's
right.
in
Harwinton, Connecticut. It's northwestern corner of Connecticut.
Okay.
Which is near nobody.
But that's the best for Renaissance fairs, when they're like way out there. Then you kind of drive to the fantasy.
Yeah, and we'll probably be doing some smaller events between now and then. We have our events posted on our webpage. We usually do, smaller things, like we'll do Renaissance dinners and other things we can do, especially as things start opening up. Hopefully soon, we can start doing those again.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I think that when people come to see you, they're gonna have a really good time and it'll be nice, because if they see this first, then they'll know who you are and they can know who to root for and maybe recognize.
Always root for me.
They'll ask, who else here is wearing your armor? I have some questions about that. But now you'll be more approachable. You won't be as scary with the helmet on and everything.
Right. Yeah. See, I'm a nice guy, mostly.
I always thought so.
Thanks.
I mean, my base is almost as big as you, so I felt like we're.
Your cello?
No, don't even start. I thought we were getting along until now. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. This has been, I think, episode 6 of Top Talks.
Wonderful.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.